Now we return to our guest, journalist Alina Malinovskaya, joining us from Moscow over the phone. Now, as I mentioned before, Putin's address falls on the day that the OSCE diplomats are meeting to discuss ways to resolve the Ukrainian crisis. And Putin defended very much Russia's foreign policy. But what impact do you think his speech will have on the talks in Basel?
Well, this will become a clear message that Vladimir Putin is not softening international rhetoric in the least. I'd say that this is a very assertive stance, if not aggressive, and the Russian president stated that Moscow will not minimize its cooperation with Western countries. And talking about Europe, Putin is certainly right to stress the fact that in practice sanctions have a boomerang effect. They mainly affect the German and European economy as a whole, and naturally these sanctions influence Russia as well. I believe that Putin has properly defined the vector of Russia's foreign policy, and it is not in Russia's interest to deteriorate the relations with the European Union. The issue with the United States is the one problem he cannot solve, and he is right to say that Washington is a factor in the triangle of the EU-Russia-US relations, seeking to poison the relations between Moscow and the EU.
You mentioned, Alina, that his speech was not threatening, but it does seem that Putin made some stark warnings for the West in his speech, and also accusations such as conspiring to destroy Russia's economy. Is that the case, or is this a shifting of blame?
Well, Putin indeed said that if the events in Ukraine had not taken place, the West would have intended another pretext to contain Russia's growing opportunities and would influence it in one way or another. And commenting on the anti-Russian restrictive measures unveiled by the West, Putin stressed that sanctions are harmful for everyone, including for those who impose them. There's no shifting the blame. Russia is suffering badly as a result of Western economic sanctions. But Ukraine's situation is far worse, with a predicted fall in the GDP of 7% this year. And if this decline continues, the Ukrainian state will face a collapse. On a brighter side, Putin unveiled a very ambitious domestic economic agenda, in my view.
Now, we know that Putin also hinted that some of the countries in the West are trying to isolate Russia. But he says that he has the strength to deal with it. Now, you're currently in Moscow. How are those words resonated in Russia amongst the public?
Well, this is not the first time that statements are made that Russia is a country that will be able to strike back in many aspects. And Putin warns the West about the conflict it is engaging into. The West tries to denounce Russia for putting pressure on Ukraine over gas supplies, but Western commentators usually neglect the fact that through cheap gas and payment terms, Russia was in fact subsidizing the Ukrainian economy. And if you take the total cost, it was several $billion each year, many times the total of Western aid during this period. So the obvious question is, will the Western states pay these billions in order to take Ukraine out of Russia's sphere of influence and into that of the West? Besides, the West simply does not have the means or the will to integrate Ukraine into the West while it tries to isolate it from Russia.
Now, Putin is also sending a message of endurance and solidarity, reducing dependence on foreign technologies and increasing domestic demand by supporting Russian producers. Are these realistically achievable?
There's no saying that this is going to be easy, and it is a long-term perspective relying on domestic producers solely in certain spheres. But at the same time, Russia has plans to develop promising relations with the Pacific region as well and within the Eurasian Economic Union, which might mean a big shift from the European suppliers. And, for example, in September, speaking at the meeting to discuss Russia's arms procurement program, he also stressed the demand for breakthrough developments in this sphere in the country.
Alina Malinovskaya, thank you very much for joining us from Moscow.